You don't need me to tell you again how different pro play is from ladder play. There's no way a group of randos is ever gonna be anywhere near as coordinated as a team of professional players who make a living playing this video game. That much is obvious. And coordination is one big thing that in team games often dictates whether or not certain strategies are even viable in the first place. With that in mind, I started to wonder, what is there that we ladder players can learn from the Overwatch League? I've been skipping a couple of upload days in order to do some research on the subject and try to avoid uploading another half-baked video like the last one. Can you get its attention somehow? Get its attention! Ah! Yep, lots and lots of research.
Grenade. Yep. Oh, run!
Oh god! Oh god! Okay, you hurt me! Memes aside, of course I can't promise that slip-ups like that won't ever happen again, especially if you're trying to chase down an upload schedule, but I did take a lot of time to think about what I wanted to cover next. Funnily enough, brainstorming was not the solution, rather just doing what I was gonna do anyway, watching the league in my own spare time. The point of today's video is not necessarily to give you mind-blowing observations on what you can do to up your game on ladder, but rather I want to differentiate between good and bad things that you can learn from the league. As we already hinted to, players really like to look at the wrong things when observing pro play. Copying hero compositions without understanding how to play them is probably one of the worst things you can do. So instead of doing that, let's talk about what you can learn from them. Number one on our list will be resource management. You see, Overwatch is as much of a team game as it is a resource game. Your resources dictate how effective your squad is at any given point in time, and trying to juggle that while also delivering on the gameplay side of things is definitely a bit challenging. However, this is not something that requires a heck of a lot of coordination. On a small scale, you can always make sure that your own resource game is on spot, and on a greater scale, it can be as easy as finding an agreement with your team on which ultimates to use for any given team fight. Tracking enemy ultimates is part of your game sense, so if you happen to be good at that, make sure that your team is always aware of which ultimates you are expecting to see, which ones you want to invest in the next team fight, and simply avoid nasty surprises. While tracking ultimates, however, don't forget that your cooldowns are part of your resource game as well. Something like McCree's Flashbang, Tracer's Recall, and Lucio's Amp It Up are all very valuable resources, so do treat them as such. Number 2 on our list will be the simple concept of taking fights on your own terms. Teams in the league are always concerned with trying to enforce their own game plan onto the opposition rather than playing into the hands of the enemy. What that means is that you want to avoid situations where you allow the enemies to do as they please. One example, if you're playing against a Widowmaker on King's Row, just don't give her any sightlines. Take a fight where you benefit from it rather than trying to run your face into the wall that the opposition has put up. There's more than one way of dealing with a problem. Of course, you can always try to counter it, but if that does not work, you can try to deny them any value. You want to run quad tank? Well, we're gonna dive your Moira then, see how well you do without that healing. If that does not work, then we'll just pull out the Junkrat and you're gonna have to deal with a Rip Tire every 45 seconds. Or what about we just stay on high ground, see how your tanks are gonna get up here. And that's just to illustrate that even if you look at a very strong ladder composition, there's often more than one way of dealing with it. A head-to-head counter is usually people's first reaction, but consider trying to deny value to the enemies if that does not work out. If you play a dive comp, then don't engage in a poke war. Pick a target and go in, because that is what your composition is good at. If you're running quad tank, then don't allow the enemies to split your group, because you're only strong as long as you stay together. It seems like such an obvious point, but so many players don't understand the strong points of their own composition and keep getting baited into teamfights that don't benefit them. So make sure that you know why you run your composition and play it according to your own strong points rather than getting baited by the enemies. And number 3 today comes down to keeping the clock in mind. Your game plan and your playstyle need to be reflective of the time that's left on the clock, and that relates to more than just stall tactics. Of course, if you're on the defending side, you want to try to strip as much time off the clock as possible, so touching the payload every so often to hold the progress, for example, might be a good idea. On offense, you want to think further than just the next 20 seconds or so. What you will notice pro players and high ladder players do is that they don't just put 6 players on the payload, because for one, the movement speed maximizes with 3 people on the point anyway. But furthermore, the team is trying to secure more ground by sending the remaining players ahead. If you sit your entire team on the payload, then we're going right back to point number 2, where you are essentially a sitting duck and you allow the opposition to take the next team fight as they please. But because you send a few people ahead, you make sure that the enemies can't ever set up, they can't get comfortable. You make regrouping as difficult as possible for them, and the longer it takes for the enemies to regroup, the more time passes without them being able to effectively contest the payload. That's how you manage to secure more than just a few meters. You make sure that you get the absolute maximum distance before the enemies are ready to take a head-on teamfight again. And that means that yes, sometimes it even makes sense to only keep 1 or 2 people on payload duty. But the clock is also something you have to consider when making hero swaps. Zarya, for example, is a hero that, in the hands of mortals, takes a good while to charge her ultimate. So if you're in a situation where you only have a minute and a half left to attack, then chances are that you won't be able to get your game-winning graviton surge up in the first place. When making hero swaps, look at how much time you got left in the time bank and ask yourself, am I swapping to play for an ultimate, and can I get that ultimate up in that time? Not every hero swap is made for an ultimate, but sometimes the hero itself is just more beneficial than your current pick. But if it is a swap that you make for an ultimate, then do keep the remaining time in mind. And just in general, optimize your game plan according to what you see on the clock. And this is gonna wrap up our video for today. 3 very general things that we can learn from watching the Overwatch League. I know that I didn't go into the nitty-gritty of specific plays and the like, but that was kind of the point. You'd think that the player base is aware of the basics, but even up in the top 1% you can see players are struggling to understand even simple things like these. And ultimately, I believe that everyone should be aware of these things when playing competitively. Overwatch is so much more than just who can get the most frags on the scoreboard, and very often it's not about who plays better, but about who plays smarter. If you are interested in something a bit more specific, then please let me know down in the comment section below. Any ideas for future videos are most definitely welcome. But anyway, I'm gonna call it a day, so thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you all next time.